Our next keynote topic is discontent. We're going to look at the over-the-top players such as Netflix and Hulu and their impact on digital content distribution and the impact on the established media giants. So interesting, thorny topic this. Got a great panel. The moderator for this one is Tony Poulos. He's editor online content at the TM Forum. His panel is Dean Walters, Chief Information Officer at Liberty Global, Andrew Feinberg, President and CEO of Netcracker, Kamal Bherwani, Chairman of Majin TV, and Howard Watson, Managing Director, Architecture and Global IT Platforms at BT. So, Tony, please bring your panel onto the stage. Thank you.
Come on, guys. Thank you very much. Well, hello everybody out there. You know, this is a very important panel because it has the longest title of any session this year. So, and we've got some very important people along as you've just been introduced to them. We're going to be talking about, the topic is discontent. It's a bit of a worry, that title. And it's all about, with the over-the-top players like Netflix and Hulu transforming digital distribution, how are established media giants changing? And we've got a couple of media giants in the room and a couple of big network operators in the room. So we're going to try and get a very sparky session going here right now. Firstly, I think we should talk about viewing habits. Before we get to the content, viewing habits are changing. People are now not necessarily sitting at home in front of the television as a family with the TV dinners watching the box anymore. A lot of people are watching by their iPad, streaming video to their PCs, to their mobile devices. What do you think is the impact on the traditional delivery models? We might start with Dean, because he is very much a traditional delivery model at the moment as a big cable TV operator worldwide. Dean, what do you think is happening out there?
Well, Tony, I think the premise of anywhere, anything, any device has certainly resonated with the consumers significantly. There's a massive shift to this paradigm. It's certainly put a lot of stress on our infrastructure, and I think that it's really challenged us to rethink the proposition and the way that we deliver content. And so I think as the industry has changed and as the new competitors have come in, it's been a real wake-up call to us, and we've had to evolve our product and invest accordingly.
With Majin TV, of course, you're an operator out of Sweden, aren't you? A very new operator, providing content direct to any device, I believe. What do you think about the traditional models, and how are you going to take advantage of them?
Well, Majin starts at the exact opposite of most traditional players. We focus on the customer forward to the device, to the content. Whereas traditional players are focused on a technology silo that says, let's do heavy CapEx investing into a box and the wiring for that box, get the content on there and link it to a household. So we're very customer-centric. The traditional players have been traditionally more household-centric. Right. And we find the viewing habits are very, very different in different people in the house. You know, my kids watch only exclusively content on their phone or their iPad. They hardly ever watch TV with me. Yeah. So I think everyone needs to be able to do it their own way. And the thing the part that's been challenging is the anywhere part. Because you can be anywhere in a country. If you go outside that country, then you get into a whole mess of rights and licensing. But when you're within the country, you should have flexibility to watch wherever you are, whenever you are.
Now, the issue about content is coming up all through this discussion about how important content is. But is content the driver now, or is it the delivery mechanism? I mean, I'm sure that's going to be a subject that we're going to come back to all the time, because we're going to argue backwards and forwards. I was going to start with Howard on this one and ask him, you know, at BT, you're very much actively getting into the cable TV space, but you're also doing quad playing as well.
Yeah, I mean, not quite the cable TV space, but
satellite.
I think one thing's for certain, though, is that the content that we acquired for BT Sport, absolutely really works. I mean, the passion for Premier League football in the UK, as everybody knows, it's the most viewed content, and we made the decision a couple of years ago to go and acquire a big chunk of those rights and transformed our business. We from a standing start. We've just completed the first season, and we got up to 5 million viewers, 3 million via our own platforms, and 2 million via the Virgin Media platform. And you know, and the key thing in launching that was not just about making it available on TV, it's about making it available throughout all. You know, when we launched on August the 1st, we simultaneously launched across 9 different distribution platforms, including online and iOS and Android. And getting all of that to work seamlessly has been a real fantastic journey.
But doesn't the onus then become, once you've got the content, on being able to deliver it seamlessly to all those devices? It's very easy, not so easy to get the content, but once you've got it, you have to make sure that every avenue is delivering it at the same pace. How are you managing that?
Well, I think part of that is owning a chain of it yourself. So we built a studio on the former Olympic Park. Right. We feed from that to BT Tower. And there we're effectively synchronizing how we play it out across all those platforms. What is hard, though, and an increasing trend we're seeing, is the use of your smartphone or tablet as a companion device. Yeah. And I have sat in our sports management centre watching a goal scored and seeing it first come through as a tweet on Twitter, then on live TV, and the live TV is 4 or 5 seconds behind, and then 25 seconds later streamed out on the tablet. Having that all synchronised is a real difficult problem that we've still got to solve. Near real-time TV. Andrew, you're providing the mechanisms for a lot of these things to happen out there. What are you seeing in the industry? Are the trends moving towards changing to be able to deliver to all these devices? Are you having to deliver the systems behind that? And what are the operators asking you for?
Well, absolutely. So if you look at the trends and the change and the rate of change, first of all, we've seen this before. You have legacy operators that are competing with young and nimble players. Yeah. So there's always that dichotomy in who's going to win and who's going to bring what to market. But at the end of the day, the operators, they still have the best content. They still have access and rights to the best what's out there. They still have the best distribution channels. So they have that advantage. On the other side, on the other hand, they have legacy, and they have the burden of that legacy, both from the technology standpoint as well as business models. So what we're seeing is this rapid change, or rapid desire to change at some levels, and a lot of resistance to change at others. Yeah. And this is evolving very, very, very quickly. I think ultimately it's going to play out that it will be much better to the end user. We as end consumers will have the benefit of access to better content, probably at better price point, and certainly anywhere at any time at most convenient fashion that we're accustomed to.
So we agree that content is very important. Whether it's still king or not, I think we'll get to in a moment. But Dean, are you finding it harder to get that content? Are you having to produce content as a provider or as a deliverer of content? Are you having to go back into the food chain further?
We are, Tony. Yeah, we are. Whilst we're very much focused on being a horizontally integrated company, the vertical integration a little bit further into the food chain is relevant today. We had to make, we made an investment a little earlier this year back into the content space, and I think we'll continue to evaluate those opportunities because it is important. And I think Kamal touched on a really big challenge around, and an important point around the rights, the rights management. And the ability, with the anywhere part of this, and then how do you manage that? How do you negotiate and manage those rights and that transient nature of the population today? The population is much more mobile than it was even 5-10 years ago, and that's not changing. That's a trend that's here to stay.
But getting the rights for each different delivery mechanism is a different process, isn't it?
Every different mechanism and every different geography is a challenge.
So we've got the Netflixes of the world that are delivering content over the top, and they don't like using that word. In fact, they don't even understand what that word means, but we call them over the top players. They're delivering it seamlessly over the top of your networks in some cases. How do you, well, you're also doing the same thing, but how do you feel about that? How do the operators feel about that? And what happens if the quality isn't so good at the other end where the customer has the handset? Who gets the phone call? Who gets blamed for that?
I mean, it certainly keeps us on our toes in terms of having the broadband network up and running, and with no capacity pinch points. And actually, in terms of who gets called, both of us usually. So we do have to equip ourselves to be able to answer a completely different set of questions, compared to what we used to.
Oh, you normally say it's their fault. probably.
No, well, we tend to not do that because the great thing about where we position it is we still effectively have the relationship with the customer.
But you also have the issue where you've got, on the wholesale side of BT, offering streaming services to the over-the-top players to get to their marketplace. So is it a conflict of interest for you?
No, we have good Chinese walls that manage that very well.
I knew that was going to come into it. Where does the money come from in all of this? Let's get down to the real tax here. A traditional model has been for cable operators subscription and maybe some advertising. For free-to-air, it's been advertising models almost exclusively. How is that going to change now if we're starting to deliver to multiple devices? We're not going to a set-top box necessarily. We may be streaming the same content to 5 people in the household. How are we going to make money out of that? And who's going to make the money out of it?
I think in the near term, this is more of an issue of lift than shift, just like it was with newspapers. I mean, when you went to digital news, everyone thought, okay, we'll keep our offline subscriptions here, and then we'll sell more digital advertising here. Yeah. And then no one expected, or they should have, but they didn't expect that this was going to go down, and then it became more shift than lift. So I think in the near term, this is more of a lift business. More instances, more engagement, more devices, more opportunities for engagement, more personalization is going to cause a lift. And later there'll be a shift and a transformation of how even TV advertising works, just on the ad side. The subscription side will be transformed as well. Our model is to give free-to-air away for free. We're unique in that regard. Others are charging for free-to-air in Germany or in the US, whether they pay for the content or not. We pay for the content. But we actually try to put money back in the value chain to broadcasters, so we pay the broadcasters, and we use the free-to-air model to get subscribers and scale to then convert them to pay packs. That's our model.
Are the operators geared for these new advertising models and revenue models in the background? You know that one.
Not today. And that's a huge change that needs to happen. It's cultural, it's technological, it's business processes. Everything has to change to go more from a subscription model to more of a transactional model. The viewer experience needs to change. The ability to communicate to individual viewers as opposed to household, that's a big change. And that change is occurring, but it's a massive transformation for traditional operators, and there's some resistance, of course. There's some other avenues of growth that some of them preferring, saying, why don't we just do something different and find other ways to make up for lost revenues as we're losing paid subscribers here, and maybe this thing goes away. So we're seeing some operators that are in denial. But more and more operators are realizing...
You looked at Dean when you said that.
No, that's it. So,
I'm a bit worried.
So, no, Dean is on the right side of this equation, but Dean is also somewhat handcuffed by the legacy operation, by how do you manage the cannibalization of your existing business. It's much more complex that for new entrants come in with a different business model. So this legacy has a lot of good that comes with it, and of course the relationship with a viewer is very important, although it has to be the relationship with the viewer as opposed to a relationship with the household. That's a critical distinction. So that's important, and Dean and others are capitalizing on that. But also, how do you become more of the interactive, transactional experience to the viewers while delivering the right content, and as you pointed out, monetizing their content properly? That's a very, very big challenge, and that's where we're focusing most of our efforts today with cable operators around the world.
Well, I'm going to come back to Dean. Oh, go on. Dean
what I would say is that, the word change is interesting, but I would think it as more an extension. Because I think that what's interesting is that sometimes everything new is old to a degree, and the new over-the-top services, they're subscription services. Some of them are transactional, but what's getting real traction is the subscription. The 4,000 titles for $10 a month. That's what's getting traction today, and. But I think the change part is shifting from the household to the person, and that's a critical change, as Andrew comments.
A nuance there is that the subscriber VOD model is getting traction, but if we look at the entire music and video space in Europe, the size of that market is about 100 billion euros. If you look at what the size of the subscriber VOD market is, it's a few percentage points. So when we talk about Netflix, we're talking about a few percentage points of 100 billion in Europe. 50% of that is video, linear video. Well, I'm not talking about VOD at all, just linear TV for cable and satellite providers. That's 50% of the market. So the rest of it is all physical theaters, streaming music, physical, traditional TV operators. I mean, all that stuff is just the rest of the 50%. Right. So the big market here is linear TV. And that's the one that has to be attacked, I think, on the OTT side. And very few people are attacking linear TV with OTT.
Why not? I mean, we're certainly trying to embrace both of those. Yeah. I think, we're continuing to build our linear TV lineup, delivering that in a sort of IPTV way as well. And if I look at our network, Netflix traffic, has gone from being single-digit percentages to, a big chunk of the peak time use of broadband now. And I guess we're in quite a good place right now because we're using content as a way of driving customers from old-style broadband onto super-fast broadband, and in the process paying us £5 or £6 extra a month. So that's sort of how we're monetizing.
Just let me get that right. You give them crap service so that they have to pay more. Is that how that works?
No, they've never had crap service, Tony. You know what I mean. I do know what you mean. And but we spent $2.5 billion rolling fibre out, and the return from that comes by moving customers onto that much higher speed infrastructure. And what the driver for that is content. We said. We spent $750 million on sport rights and then gave it away free with BT broadband.
Right.
And that was to drive people onto high-speed broadband.
Yep.
And it's working fantastically.
Yeah, I watched BBC Player in Thailand and I can't get that service. I was a bit annoyed about that. It was a very good ad. Dean, what are you doing to keep customers on board with this idea that they can get an all-you-can-eat model outside, but when they buy traditional content from you, they have to buy normally bundles of service? Are we going to see that model changing for cable operators and satellite operators?
Oh, Tony, I think it's certainly under test at the moment. The old, the adage of packaging and bundling is certainly changing, and we're reviewing that. It's very much becoming a separation between connectivity. What sort of connectivity package do I want? How much mobility do I want with that package? That anywhere, anytime sort of concept. And then what content do I want to consume? What level of content? And so I think there's still an element of packaging, but it becomes the minor, and the more major part of it is more user-selected content. And so we're seeing that. The other thing is that we're giving the consumers the opportunity on our platform to access the over-the-top services. I think in Virgin, where we included Netflix and co-opted that into the TiVo platform, is a good example of how it comes together to bring the best of both worlds.
So you're actually collecting the subscriptions for Netflix as well at the?
No, we don't have a direct relationship, commercial relationship there. It's basically a pass-through. But it's a convenience opportunity for the consumer. Yeah. One remote, one screen, and
so it's like a peering arrangement of sorts. Not wanting to use
It's enabling. It's convenience for the consumer. Give them one interface, allow them to sort of to sit there and access whether it be Netflix, whether it be another over-the-top service, or whether it be their traditional linear TV or the on-demand content they might want to choose.
Are Netflix and who? Oh, sorry, go on, Andrew.
It's actually a little more than that, because you mentioned experience and convenience for the consumer. Yeah. So I have a cable operator coming to my house, and I have access on smart TV. We all have smart TVs today. So right there, I have Netflix and Apple TV. My kids never go to traditional cable operator to buy content. The content happens to be much better with a cable company than with Netflix or Apple TV. But the interface is extremely unfriendly, and it's hard to use. Whereas when I go to Netflix or Apple TV, they know who I am. In fact, they know who I am. They know who my kids are. They know who every viewer in the house is. They provide recommendations. They say, if you like this, you may also like this. It's very intuitive. It's truly focused on the user, where cable companies today lack in that dimension, and that's critical.
Companies. That's actually if you look at the Horizon platform, you'll see a very much similar user interface.
I'm talking about my provider.
Oh, okay.
My provider. But having said that,
I knew we shouldn't have put you two together. Right? I knew it.
They understand this. So having said that, they understand it, and they say, we want to become effectively a software company because it's all about that user experience. How do we do this? And then you get into details of minor details. How do you take this massive legacy and mostly cultural. Technology is very important of that, but I think you would agree with me that it's just we've been doing this for many years. We started competing with telephone companies some time ago, and we handle that okay, and we'll get through this as well. And that's the hardest piece to change.
The other side of that is that some people actually get used to using the step-through online guide, and when you change that, they ring up and complain about it because the things aren't in the same, or you change the channel numbers.
Only old guys like you and me, though.
Yeah, listen, I don't know how to do it any other way. In fact, I have to get my wife to find the program. She's the only one that knows how to use it. Now, what's the solution to that? What's the alternative? We're going to have the ability to, through a mobile phone, actually select my cable TV channel for the day? Is that on the card?
Oh, we do that now.
You do that now?
Of course.
I'll tell you what I think.
See, I'm not a Liberty Global customer. That's a mistake.
What I think in that sort of martini world of anytime, any place, anywhere. Hang
on, how's with the martini model?
Well,
do you drink that much anytime, any place, anywhere?
Remember the advert?
Okay, good. Okay, it's cool.
The thing I think is still quite hard is combining the entitlement to view to an individual rather than a household. With multiple devices at multiple times. And I think where we as an industry need to get better is, we are quite crude in the way we do that at the moment, which is you can have as many devices as a customer, but I only let you simultaneously stream on 2 of them. Okay. That's quite a crude way of controlling rights entitlement. We need to get much smarter, I think, at having the technology in the IT space to be able to understand who's viewing what where, and how that fits in the right.
Andrew's got that technology. You two should get together.
Yeah, Andrew needs
to talk about it.
Andrew needs to help us with that a bit, I think.
I knew that was going to happen.
But you're also talking, the customers changed, right? So we used to have a household, whatever that is, and we were selling primarily to those who pay the bills, right? Today, we need to sell to teenagers, to even younger kids, because they become main consumers and effectively main buyers of content. So you kind of target sports programming to dad, and you have something else for mom, but it's the kids who consume most of that content. How do we differentiate it? How do we know this? How do we bill transactionally for that? That's the challenge to that.
And part of the differentiation of the content is that there's some obscurity about whether or not you can do certain things with the content.
Yeah.
So catch-up rights are different.
Yes.
Streaming over 3G is different. Wi-Fi is different.
Yeah.
Time shifting, start over, all those things have to be negotiated. And if you're negotiating with a regional operator, a regional broadcaster or a retransmitter, you still have to go back to Hollywood and see whether the contracts all the way through allow for those rights. So it's complex. And some broadcasters will say, no, we don't want you to do that. And then that over time they say, okay, well, you know what, catch up and time shifting actually allow us to have more viewing share. So we're going to enable that on your platform. So we have some channels where you can watch the live stream. Some you can rewind or fast forward, some you can't. Some you can catch up, some you can't, because each channel is a different discussion.
And I think that's a really important one, because I mean, what we observe with our customers' use of DVRs is, even for linear TV, if you're on an advertising funded channel, you will start 10 minutes late and then just skip through the ads. And as you move that away from a hard drive DVR in the set-top into the network, it becomes harder for customers to do that. And I think there is going to be a bit of an annoyance factor if you can't skip the ads.
Yeah, I understand, and I agree. People in the audience, you must be wondering or have some questions in your own minds. Don't forget that on Twitter you can use hashtag TMF Live and send some questions through to these guys. It's not often you get to hammer them in public, so this is a good time to do it. So ask those questions. I'll be watching on my iPad here as they come through. I want to touch on a really sensitive subject that I think affects both over-the-top players and all of you in the room, and it's that of regulation. When you're in one country, you can manage your regulation quite well, but you're a pan-European now operator, you're all-round-the-world operator, you're providing systems everywhere as well. How much is regulation affecting the distribution of this content, and particularly how much of a pain is it for you to get over when you want to roll out service? Dean, do you want to go with that first?
It is very complex. It is probably one of the most high growth area of complexity in our business today. The technology and the innovation has been important over the last few years and continues to be so, but the regulatory impact to us is certainly pervasive. It's in where and how we distribute it, and that's tied up with ownership, as well. But then it's also tied up with the network access question. And I won't use the NN word, but I think...
I'll get to that.
I know you will, and I said I wouldn't comment. But I think it's changing, and I think that everyone's finding their feet. Just like the content owners and various content distributors, everyone's at different stages of the evolution and the thinking process. And I think we're in that thinking process, and it's evolving real time. And we're having to sort of shape our businesses and our products real time to support that.
How about you've really got the situation across Europe, I know.
Well, it's interesting because in the OTT world, the regulatory issue is more like the Wild West. Everyone does what they think is the right thing to do. So we've taken a fairly conservative stance. I mean, one thing that's differentiated for us is that we can go into a country on 30 days notice. If we can get the content and the rights, we don't need to worry about licensing of regulatory licensing. We don't have to worry about investing in infrastructure. We invest in very little infrastructure. We do everything else in the cloud. So we can go into a country in 30 days notice. And what we have had issues with is people saying, well, are you going to live to the same standards of broadcast TV around things like subtitles, mandatory subtitling, parental control, those things. So we've taken great pains to develop those things into our product that other OTT players just haven't done yet, because they're outside of the regulatory side. We're predicting that these things will be regulated, and therefore we've taken pains to be compliant. And we want to make the broadcasters happy as well. But no country really is regulating OTT that I'm aware of.
Well, they're not yet, but
not yet.
No, there's just some of the attributes.
The attributes
that
of
fall
it,
under.
right?
Yeah. And
we talked earlier about the content, and you negotiate content deals for delivery via cable and set-top boxes, and then somebody in the same country...
And over the top.
And over the top, but somebody in the country suddenly gets the rights to deliver it through another mechanism or in time phasing or whatever. How annoying is that? I mean, does it happen very often, or do you get first option on content in a country?
We certainly don't get first option. I think it's an interactive conversation. It depends on what stage a particular market's at in its own evolution, how sophisticated the content owners are, and it is frustrating. But it is something that we're spending a lot of time on, and it's something you have to focus on. You have to focus on that rights negotiation. And I think if we go back to the beginnings of our industry and the more recent times, we've been pretty successful at it. But it's been fairly simple, and the complexity that's now there today has changed the negotiation process, has changed the timetable, and has certainly changed some of the outcomes.
We did get a question from the audience on this. Can local content roam to other countries? It seems the difference to OTT players. So if you're subscribing to local content and you roam to another country, can you actually pick it up? I'd imagine that's a good question for you.
Today we have geo-blocking to be compliant with the rights agreements. Apple allows, if you're an expatriate American living in Spain, which I was for 4 years, I could watch my content on Apple TV because my credit card is registered to the US. So Apple got an exception to that through that. But on our side, if you're a German customer, if you're outside of Germany, it doesn't work. We're trying to negotiate innovative things that say, okay, you can go on a vacation mode for a certain number of weeks per year, and we're trying to figure out how we can technologically deal with the issue. And certainly you can do it because if you're watching it on a mobile device, you have a very good idea of what device that is. So I don't think it's an issue of just the maturity of the content model, licensing model, more than anything else.
Well, as a maturity of customers, because my kids introduced me to VPNs years ago because we lived in Thailand and they could watch English television through a VPN. How big a problem is that for the industry? Maybe not so much for a cable operator with a closed network, but for you it must be a question.
I think it's not a big problem at the moment. I mean, there are ways and means.
You're getting a bigger audience, you know that, don't you?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I like your suggestion, which is, because if I go away for a long weekend to Nice, I might want to watch BT Sport Premier League game. It'd be great if I could get the rights to have so many vacation days a year for doing that. And I think that would make a lot of sense. It'd be a lot easier to do that than attempt to VPN back into the UK.
You've just given Andrew a great new marketing idea now. He's already ticking over thinking, that's a good model, we should do that.
I think we've all said that it's a maturity of the supply chain and the value chain, and it will come to parity. It is frustrating, I'm sure, when you're a very, very large customer of content provider and you pay a lot and then Netflix comes in and gets the same content for pennies on the dollar. This is frustrating, but it will evolve. And the good news, it's evolving very quickly. There are lots of smart people looking into it and figuring out how to deal with this. And I'm sure we'll come to a point where we will be able to do this. It has to happen, right? So I think and I think all of us, regulatory issues are critical. The question becomes then, we don't have a lot of control in this. Maybe you have some, but not a lot. So it's just a question, how do you create a delivery model that is flexible enough and agile enough that you could actually live in any and be profitable in any of those environments?
So let's look at the values of companies that are distributing content as opposed to those that are creating content. And let's look at it in market cap terms. It's a hot topic because it seems to me that the guys that are making the content have much better market caps than those that are delivering the content. Why is that? What's happening in the marketplace?
I would disagree with that statement. I would say that the market caps for the people producing the content in traditional media versus distributing the content in traditional media, there's a difference. If you look at the market caps of the digital media companies that have leveraged existing infrastructure, leveraged existing content, and added a wrapper of neat technology around it, they have much higher market caps, at least in the last couple of years, and probably into the near medium term than any of the content producers combined. So, and I'm talking about Apple, Google, Amazon. These are all media distribution outlets, and if you add their market caps, they're much higher than Disney and everyone else combined.
Yeah, that was sneaky getting those ones in there.
Well, Apple is a media distribution company, and so is
Google. What about
and so is
HBO,
Amazon.
for example, that produces some great television? Their market cap's not bad either.
Well, they're part of Time Warner.
They are, that's right. The market cap went up and down, didn't it, after that?
But it's also a question of addressable market.
Yeah.
Right. So most traditional cable operators are viewed as regional players. So there's a finite number of customers. Netflix, of course, is global, so the market gives credit for that. So the cable companies, though, are now very aggressively looking at how do I go beyond my region? How do I extend my content? So if one of my customers, or for that matter, somebody else wants to buy my content, how do I make it available? So that goes back to more of a transactional model than a subscription model, and I think we'll see a lot more of that, and that will be reflected in values as well, and valuations.
If you're a traditional player looking to transform, you have to play defense in your established markets and play offense in the new markets.
Yeah.
And the only way to play offense in new markets is OTT.
Yep.
It'd be ridiculous to make high capex investments with uncertainty about when you'll make a return.
Well, I'm not sure about Liberty Global's situation. You make big capex investments in countries after you move in, don't you, to get distribution?
We do, but we are making those over-the-top investments, and they're really important. Yeah, so I think there's two areas today. There's over-the-top, and there's the innovation in the user interface, which is what we started talking about very early in the conversation today.
Yes. Yeah. What about the issues of net neutrality? They're going to come up. They keep coming up and going away, coming up, going away. Will this affect the over-the-top players, do you think, in any way, or are they affected now by people offering different grades of service to their customers? And should net neutrality allow over-the-top players to just have free reign over your networks and other networks, perhaps?
I mean, one interesting dynamic is, I was mentioning to a colleague the other day, is that Netflix have now cleverly started publishing in each country which ISP is the best at conveying their video streams.
That's right.
And actually, it does have an effect. If you look at our predictions, we're currently, I think our network's currently carrying 2 terabits per second at speed. We think that's at peak. We think that will go up to 9 or 10 over the next 5 years.
How much of that is your content versus over the top?
A lot of that will be driven by over the top content. And fundamentally, the model that we've used, which is compete on speed, invest on usage, is a bit of a challenge.
That's a tough one.
I think that model clearly still has legs, whilst there's good competition in each market between cable operators and IPTV players and satellite players. But I would think that at some point things will need to, the dynamics will have to shift somewhat, I think.
Kamal, you've got this issue right now, haven't you? Because Europe is disjointed.
I like neutrality, because it helps me. But on top of that, I think there are lots of, competitive. I think it spurs net neutrality equals competition. And if you get rid of net neutrality as a whole, then even as a concept, I think you get into all kinds of antitrust issues. Number one. Number two, you're asking two different people to pay for your service. You're asking the consumer to pay for the broadband. On the other side, you're asking for the provider that's using the highway that someone else is paying for, and you're asking for the toll again.
Yeah.
So it is double charging.
And what's wrong with that?
Right, what's wrong with that? The answer is it's anti-competitive, and you can drive an outcome that you shouldn't be able to drive.
Yep.
But tollways is a good example. That's a real-world example. You can go down the coast road on the highway for free, or if you want to save half an hour, you can jump on the tollway and pay.
Yep.
No, that's true. But the question is, who should pay for it? It should be two different people paying for the same highway.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, that's sharing the cost.
But I think it can be a differentiating opportunity. If a consumer wants to pay for a quality of service situation, should he be able to? Should he be able to elect to pay for that?
Well, you have max data caps and you have bandwidth. So you have two dimensions. You have the number of bytes you're transmitting over a period of time, and how many you can do at any given point in time. And I think those are the two dimensions that people are used to paying for data. And if they want to do more Netflix, then they pay for more for the data.
But we're really bringing the third dimension in of quality, of guaranteeing that, again, those bytes.
Yeah. Well, at one of my homes, I get 150 megabit through Verizon in New York, and I'm happy with 150 megabit.
Yep.
That's good enough, and I pay a lot of money for that. So, I think the issue of net neutrality is more around, telecoms, media, and technology are all converging. And I think the telecoms are just a little upset that their market caps have not gone up. And they're investing more and more and getting maybe less of a return over time, or not matching their stock performance with the high-tech players, the digital players. So I understand that friction.
But also history tends to repeat itself, right? So recall back in the U.S. during the peak of deregulations, where the traditional players lost market cap and all these new players came in and all of a sudden raised the market cap by trillions of dollars. And where are they now?
Yeah.
Right? So this is where your relationship with the customer, the infrastructure, the distribution, and content rights are critical. And again, if you're able to transform all of these enormous assets that legacy operators have into a more agile model, more agile relationship with the viewer, more agile, potentially transactional service relationship, lower cost, because that's very important too. You said, both you and Netflix get a call. I bet your cost of processing that call is much, much higher than Netflix's cost of processing that call. That's another very important aspect. So driving the cost down and creating the parity for this, that's, I think, how we will evolve in this market.
You've been listening to Keith Willits talking. You sounded just like him then.
I always did.
You did.
And can we, just defend market cap for telcos for a minute?
You've got a hard battle doing that.
Our market cap's been just fine recently. And I think that, if you look at, we've still a lot of road to go in terms of going from dual play to triple play to quad play, and giving customers access to all types of content that they want. We talk about is content king. It's still customer that's king at the end of the day, and enriching that close relationship that Dean and I have with those end customers is where I think we'll continue to monetize.
But we're talking about, when I talk about net neutrality, and I'm just going to come back to that for 1 second because we're getting close. We're talking about all networks having to open up, but cable networks seem to miss out. They don't have to necessarily open up. Do you see the time when we're going to be able to deliver our stuff over your network to your customers? Sorry, Dean.
Well, I guess to a degree they are open. Like where we carry IP, which is is our basic, is our lead product today. Our connectivity, is no different to the DSL connectivity when you think about it.
So that's an unfair question. It was. I apologise
so,
for that. One last one from the audience for us. Have heard about the future of OTT content providers eventually having to cooperate with carriers to ensure delivery quality. Will that happen, and how will that cooperation work? And I think it's already happening in some cases.
It is happening.
Yeah, it is happening.
So it's in some areas, some markets, certainly it is.
How that works now is the content, the over-the-top players pushing caching deeper and deeper into our networks, and that's we encourage that. That drives much better quality for customers.
So what are we going to call them now? We have to change the name. They're not necessarily over-the-top players. They're buddies now, aren't they?
I think over the top still works.
I thought you might say that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today and spending time with us. I'm sure the audience appreciated some of the comments that came out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to our panels. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Great panel there. So that's our second and final keynote of the morning. I'm just going to attempt to summarize briefly some of the key takeaways for me from what I've heard before we wrap. So Anne Bouvereau, very interesting on the future of the mobile industry. Just going to hone in on what she said about digital commerce and mobile commerce. She said nobody holds the keys to make mobile commerce work, and she pointed out it involves literally hundreds to thousands of stakeholders, particularly in the developed world. And it's really important to simplify the interfaces in that environment. And interestingly, it could be a market where developing countries lead the way. She mentioned, I think there's 200 million mobile money users worldwide, and about half of those are in Africa. So in many ways, the developing world could leapfrog with mobile commerce. Now, some takeaways from the panel we just heard. They covered a lot of ground, but just a couple of interesting things I thought. One is if content isn't king, it's certainly going to be the kingmaker. BT described spending hundreds of millions of pounds on sports rights and then giving it away for free with BT broadband. Interesting model. And is BT now a media company? It's got 5 million viewers for BT Sport. Liberty's going more into the content space, becoming more vertically integrated. And clearly the net neutrality issue, as we heard, that it's going to run and run. I thought it was interesting that Netflix is now publishing which ISP is the best at delivering its content in each country. That's, again, it's going to be, these techniques are going to be out there and used repeatedly on this net neutrality issue. And finally, I just want to highlight where's the money. I think as Kamal said, we're going to see more lift than shift. So we're going to see a lift in overall TV engagement. But the question for me is, does that mean more revenues? And how do you actually monetize that lift? And there's this question about, are we moving from a subscription model to a transactional model, which would clearly be a major shift, but is it actually happening in reality? But one trend is clear. We've got to shift away from the household to the individual and the whole personalization that involves, which is obviously a major topic for this forum. So some very interesting stuff to digest there. I'd like to thank all our speakers, and I'd like to thank you, the audience, for your time here today and interacting through the Twitter medium. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.